You have been alive your entire life, obviously, and yet there is a chunk of your existence, a significant chunk, years of it, that is just gone. Completely. Utterly. Gone. This is called infantile amnesia, and it is one of the strangest, most fascinating, most genuinely mysterious things about being a human being. Scientists have been trying to explain it properly for over a century. Developmental psychologists have theories, neuroscientists have theories, and they all disagree with each other in very interesting ways. So today we are going to dig into all of it. Why your earliest years are a complete blank. What is actually happening in a baby's brain during that time, whether those memories are truly gone or just hiding somewhere. And what it all tells us about memory, identity, and what it actually means to be you. Let us establish exactly what we are dealing with here. Most adults have no reliable autobiographical memories, memories of specific personal experiences from before the age of 2.5 to 3 years old. That is the rough floor for most people. And even between 3 and 7, memories are patchy, fragmentary, and often unreliable. The average person's earliest clear, detailed memory comes from around 3 to 3.5 years of age. Think about what that means in terms of time. If you live to 80, you are missing approximately the first 3 to 4% of your life entirely, which sounds small until you consider that those years contain some of the most intense, rapid, consequential development your brain will ever undergo. And here is the part that makes it genuinely strange. Babies and toddlers are not unconscious during this period. They are not passive. They are not failing to experience things. Studies consistently show that infants as young as 6 months old can form memories. Not long-term autobiographical ones, but memories nonetheless. A 6-month-old who is shown a specific toy will recognize it weeks later. A 1-year-old who watches someone perform a sequence of actions can reproduce those actions the next day. The memory is there. It is working. And yet, none of it sticks. Not in the way that becomes part of the story of your life. So what is going on? We should probably address Sigmund Freud first, because he was the one who actually named infantile amnesia and brought it to scientific attention in the early 20th century. Freud's theory, in simplified form, was this: we do not remember early childhood because those memories are actively suppressed, not lost, hidden, buried beneath the surface of consciousness because early childhood contains experiences so raw, so overwhelming, so emotionally unprocessable that the developing mind locks them away for self-protection. In Freud's framework, this included what he believed were deeply uncomfortable feelings toward parents, desires and fears he described in terms that are, let us say, complicated, and that generated enormous controversy both at the time and since. The modern scientific consensus is that Freud was wrong about the mechanism. The suppression theory does not hold up. We are not hiding these memories. We genuinely do not have them in the way he imagined, but there is something in the broader intuition worth holding on to, because some researchers do believe that emotional experience in early childhood, even without explicit memories, leaves traces that shape us, not as retrievable memories, but as patterns, tendencies, emotional responses, the way you react to certain situations, the things that make you inexplicably comfortable or inexplicably anxious. Your babyhood may not be in your memory, but it may be in your nervous system, which is either reassuring or slightly alarming depending on your perspective. Here is where the neuroscience gets genuinely fascinating. Deep inside your brain sits a structure called the hippocampus. It is named after the Latin word for seahorse, because early anatomists thought it looked like one, which is either charmingly creative or deeply concerning depending on how much trust you place in the anatomical imagination of 16th century scientists. The hippocampus is the brain's primary memory processing center. Specifically, it is responsible for consolidating episodic memories, memories of specific events in specific places at specific times. The what, where, and when of your personal history. This is the structure that turns an experience into a lasting memory. And in human infants, the hippocampus is not finished developing. Not even close. At birth, the hippocampus is structurally present, but functionally immature. The neurons are there, but the connections between them, the dense, complex network of synaptic links that allows information to be properly encoded and stored, are still being built. This process continues rapidly through the first years of life and is not substantially complete until somewhere between 3 and 5 years of age. This is the most straightforward explanation for infantile amnesia. The filing system is not installed yet. Experiences are happening, vivid, real, emotionally significant experiences, but the neural infrastructure required to encode them as lasting autobiographical memories simply does not exist yet. It is like trying to save a document on a computer that does not yet have a hard drive. The processing is happening, the information is real, but there is nowhere for it to go. Here is what makes this even more interesting. The hippocampus does not develop uniformly. Different parts of it mature at different rates. The parts responsible for simple associative memory, recognizing familiar things, basic conditioning, develop earlier. The parts responsible for complex episodic memory, the narrative, I was there, and this happened, and I felt this kind of memory, develop later. This is why babies can remember things in a functional sense, recognizing faces, anticipating routines, without being able to form the kind of memories that become part of a personal story. Here is another layer to this, and it is one that people do not often consider. Memory and language are deeply intertwined, not completely. There are types of memory that do not require language at all. But autobiographical memory, the narrative memory of your personal history, is fundamentally shaped by language, by the ability to put experiences into words, to give them structure, sequence, and meaning. And babies do not have language, not in the early months, not really in the more complex sense, until somewhere between 2 and 3 years old. Consider what it means to remember something. You are not playing back a video recording. Human memory does not work like that. When you remember an event, you are reconstructing it, pulling together fragments of sensory information, emotional residue, and narrative context, and assembling them into something that feels like a coherent experience. Language is the scaffolding for that reconstruction. The words are what hold the fragments together. They are what let you organize the experience, file it under the right categories, connect it to other memories, and retrieve it later. Without language, experiences are felt intensely, really, but they cannot be organized into the kind of narrative structure that becomes a retrievable, autobiographical memory. You cannot tell yourself the story of what is happening to you because you do not yet have the tools to tell stories. Research backs this up in a striking way. Studies have found that the earliest memories people can recall tend to appear slightly later in cultures with less emphasis on narrative storytelling in early childhood and slightly earlier in cultures where parents frequently talk with children about shared past experiences from a very young age. In other words, being told stories about your own past as a young child actually helps you form and retain memories of it. Parents who regularly say things like, "Remember when we went to the beach and you found that shell?" are not just being nostalgic, they are literally helping build their child's memory architecture. The story of your life, it turns out, starts being written by other people before you are old enough to hold the pen. Here's where it gets philosophical. Stay with me. This is worth it. Autobiographical memory is not just about recording events. It requires something else, something that sounds simple but is actually one of the most complex achievements of the human mind. It requires a self to remember. What I mean by that is this. For a memory to become autobiographical, for it to be filed as something that happened to me, you need a stable, continuous sense of yourself as an individual who persists through time. You need to understand at some level that the you of yesterday is the same you as the you of today. That experiences happen to a continuous person, not just in a continuous universe. This sense of self, what psychologists call the autobiographical self, does not exist at birth. It develops gradually through the first years of life. One of the most famous tests for self-awareness is the mirror test. You place a mark on an animal's forehead, or a child's, without them knowing, and then show them a mirror. Do they reach for their own forehead, understanding that the reflection is them? Or do they reach toward the mirror, treating the reflection as another individual? Most human children do not pass the mirror test until somewhere between 18 months and 2 years of age. Before that point, the concept of me as a distinct, persistent individual is not yet fully formed. And if there is no stable me, there is nowhere for autobiographical memories to be addressed to. The filing system exists, sort of, but the name on the filing cabinet is not there yet. Experiences float by, intensely felt and then gone, with no self to attach them to. This is perhaps the most profound explanation of all. We do not remember being babies not just because our brains are unfinished and not just because we lack language, but because we were not yet, in a philosophically meaningful sense, fully us. The person those things happened to was you in progress, a you that was still being assembled, and by the time the assembly was complete enough to start keeping records, the early chapters had already passed. Right. Here's the question that everyone actually wants answered. Are those early memories completely, permanently, irretrievably gone? Or are they in there somewhere, buried, inaccessible, but not erased? The honest answer is we do not fully know, and the research is genuinely divided. On one hand, there is strong evidence that early experiences leave lasting traces, not as explicit memories, but as implicit ones. Implicit memories are memories that influence your behavior and responses without you consciously recalling them. Skills, habits, emotional associations, conditioned responses. These are stored differently from autobiographical memories in different brain structures, and they are far more robust. You do not remember learning to walk, but your body knows how to do it. You do not remember the first time you heard your mother's voice, but something in your nervous system responds to warmth and familiarity in ways that were shaped by thousands of early interactions you cannot consciously recall. There is also some tantalizing research suggesting that very early experiences, even from the first months of life, can surface under certain conditions. Some hypnotherapy studies have claimed to recover early memories, though the scientific validity of these is deeply contested, and the risk of false memory construction is very high. The brain is extraordinarily good at confabulating, making up plausible sounding memories that feel completely real. And this risk skyrockets when people are actively trying to retrieve something they are told should be there. What is more reliably documented is this. People who experience significant trauma in early childhood, before the normal age of autobiographical memory, often show emotional and physiological responses to stimuli related to that trauma, even with no conscious memory of the event itself. The body, as they say, keeps the score, even when the mind has no record of what happened. So the picture that emerges is complex and somewhat eerie. Your early life is not in your memory, but it is in you, in your patterns, your reflexes, your emotional landscape, your nervous system. The experiences of your first years shape the person you became, invisibly, silently, completely, and then slipped below the surface of conscious recall. You cannot remember being a baby, but being a baby made you who you are. Here is a final thought, and it is one that tends to stick with people. The infantile amnesia you experience is not unique to humans. Several other animals show similar patterns. Rats, for instance, show the same rapid forgetting of early memories, and their hippocampal development follows a similar trajectory to humans. But here is the twist. In rats, researchers have been able to do something remarkable. By stimulating the development of the hippocampus artificially, accelerating its maturation, they were able to extend the period over which early memories are retained. The flip side of this, though, is that accelerating hippocampal maturation in young rats disrupts other aspects of development. The brain, it seems, has a reason for developing slowly. The extended period of neural immaturity in human infants, the longest of any species by far, is not a bug. It is a feature. The slow development of the hippocampus creates space for the brain to wire itself in response to experience, to grow in the directions that the environment demands, to develop with a flexibility that a more rapidly maturing brain would not have. Human children are extraordinarily adaptable precisely because their brains are unfinished for so long. The cost of that adaptability is infantile amnesia. You forgot your early childhood because your brain was busy doing something more important. It was becoming capable of everything you have done since. So, why do we not remember being babies? Because the hippocampus, your brain's memory filing system, was not ready yet. Because without language, experiences cannot be built into the narrative structures that become lasting memories. because the sense of self required to have autobiographical memories, a stable, continuous me to whom things happen, was still being assembled. And because, in a strange and beautiful way, the very thing that makes human beings so remarkable, our extraordinary adaptability, our prolonged development, our capacity to be shaped by our environment, requires the brain to stay open and unfinished for longer than any other creature on Earth. Those years are not in your memory, but they are in you, in the way you respond to kindness, in the things that make you feel safe, in the patterns and reflexes and emotional responses that you carry without knowing where they came from. Your babyhood is not a gap in your story. It is the foundation the whole story is built on. You just cannot see it from where you are standing now, which is honestly one of the most human things imaginable, built entirely on a beginning we cannot remember, shaped by a past we cannot access, and moving forward anyway.